What if I told you the most powerful person in the room isn't the loudest, but the quietest? That true dominance comes not from force, but from restraint. In a world full of noise, the real masters move in silence. They don't demand attention. They control it. They don't react. They calculate. If you've ever felt overpowered by louder voices or overlooked in rooms filled with ego, this video will change your strategy, because dominance isn't about being aggressive. It's about mastering yourself first, your emotions, your timing, your presence. When you become unreadable, you become untouchable. In this video, you'll learn 7 Stoic rules for total dominance, how to influence without forcing, how to observe without absorbing, and how to win long-term games by staying calm when others lose control. Like this video, subscribe for more Stoic strategies, and let's begin.
Number 1.
Master your calm. In every room, there's always one person whose presence shapes the entire energy, without saying a word. That person is not the loudest, not the flashiest, not the one trying to impress. It's the calmest, because calm is not passivity, it's precision. And in a world where everyone is reacting, the person who stays still gains power by default. The Stoics understood this long before the modern world labeled it emotional intelligence. To them, calm wasn't just a personality trait, it was a form of dominance. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That wasn't poetry, that was strategic doctrine. The Stoics didn't try to suppress emotion, they simply trained themselves to become immune to its control. They believed that the man who cannot be provoked is the man who cannot be dominated. Now pause and examine your own life. How many times have you lost your position the moment you raised your voice? How often has reacting too quickly put you at a disadvantage? Every time you let anger dictate your tone, every time you let frustration guide your hand, you hand over your power, and people, especially manipulators, can sense that fracture. The moment your composure cracks, you become transparent, predictable, vulnerable. But when you master your calm, when your internal state remains centered no matter what storm is brewing outside, you become unreadable. And unreadable people are dangerous because no one knows what you'll do next. You introduce psychological pressure simply by not reacting. Your silence becomes a mirror, and people often crumble when forced to sit with their own reflection. This kind of calm isn't something you're born with. It's earned. It's built slowly through repeated exposure to chaos and a conscious choice not to be pulled into it. And here's the key. The calmest person in the room controls the rhythm, because emotions are contagious. One panicked voice spreads like wildfire. But calm, real, unshakable calm, it resets the entire atmosphere. Imagine this scenario. You're at a table. Someone criticizes you harshly, publicly, and unfairly. They expect you to defend yourself, to snap back, to lose control. Most people do, but the master of calm doesn't flinch. He doesn't rush to respond. He lets the silence expand. He looks, he breathes, he observes. Not just the words, but the tone, the posture, the insecurity behind the attack. And when he finally does speak, it's short, measured, unemotional. And suddenly the room isn't watching the critic anymore. They're watching you. That's influence without aggression. That's dominance through stillness. As Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. In that microscopic gap between stimulus and response lies your power. The more you expand that gap, the more strategic you become. Let's turn to a real example. Warren Buffett is widely considered one of the most disciplined thinkers in business history. He's not flashy, he's not emotional, he doesn't respond to market hysteria like most investors. While others panic, he remains still. He observes, he waits, And when he moves, he does so with confidence, calmly, precisely, and only when necessary. That's not just financial wisdom, that's composure applied to real-world pressure, and it's earned him a reputation as one of the most respected and effective decision-makers alive. In contrast, the average person reacts instantly to provocation. Whether it's a passive-aggressive email, a rude comment online, or a critical look from someone across the room, they burn their energy fighting shadows. They exhaust themselves trying to control what they cannot. But the person who is anchored, who has mastered their own nervous system, becomes untouchable. That's not spiritual fluff. That's psychological leverage. So how do you build it? Start small. Let someone talk over you. And instead of interrupting, pause. Let the moment breathe. Observe how uncomfortable silence makes other people and learn to love it. Delay your response by just a few seconds. In those seconds, you'll notice something profound. You start thinking more clearly. Your emotions lose their grip, and you become the one steering the conversation. Calm is a skill, a muscle, and like any muscle, it only grows when tested. Train it during the small, frustrating moments, so that when life throws something bigger, you're not shaken, you're still, grounded, watching. Because while others chase attention, argue for control, and collapse under pressure, you'll stay rooted in your own authority, not because you're louder, but because you're unshakable. And that's why the calmest man in the room always wins. Not because he fights harder, but because he never had to fight at all.
Number 2.
Let them speak first. Power doesn't always go to the loudest voice in the room. More often, it belongs to the person who waits, the one who resists the urge to dominate the conversation, the one who lets others speak first, not because they lack confidence, but because they're gathering intelligence. This isn't weakness, it's strategy, and it's one the Stoics used masterfully. Seneca once wrote, "It is a great thing to know the season for speech and the season for silence." That distinction isn't just philosophical, it's psychological warfare. Because when you let someone speak first, you're not just being polite, you're uncovering their fears, their priorities, their hidden angles. Every word they say is a thread leading you straight to the structure of their thinking. And all you have to do is listen. Stoicism teaches self-restraint as a kind of personal armor. To wait and observe before acting. To stay composed while others reveal their hand. Epictetus reminded his students, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." There's power in that ratio because when others rush to fill the silence, you gain something rare, clarity. Letting others speak first gives you 3 advantages. First, it puts them at ease. People want to be heard more than they want to be agreed with. Second, it reveals their framework. Their words will show what they care about, what they fear, and what they believe you value. And third, it positions you as calm, grounded, and in control. When you don't need to jump in, people assume you're either confident or calculating. Either way, you gain the upper hand. Let's bring this down from philosophy to practice. Imagine you're in a negotiation. Most people feel pressure to make the first offer, to speak first, to take charge. But the wiser move is to sit back and ask, what outcome are you hoping for here? Then go silent, that pause. It creates tension, and in that tension, the other person often gives you everything. They explain their priorities, their limits, sometimes even their desperation, all while you sit, absorbing. This is what the great interviewers and leaders do. Maya Angelou, for instance, had a remarkable presence, not because she overwhelmed the room with speech, but because she was profoundly present. She asked thoughtful questions, and then she waited. People opened up to her not because she pulled the truth out of them, but because her calm silence made them feel seen. And when people feel seen, they speak more. They reveal more, and in that openness, real insight begins. But this tactic doesn't just work in high-stakes rooms. It works in everyday life, at work, in relationships, in disagreements. The next time someone challenges you, don't interrupt. Don't rush to defend yourself. Ask, what's making you feel that way? And then go still. Most people argue from emotion, not logic. Let the emotion burn out. Let them empty themselves. When you finally speak, your response will be based on their reality, not your assumptions. The challenge here isn't intellectual, it's emotional. Can you handle the discomfort of silence? Can you resist the ego's need to be heard right away? That's where Stoic discipline is tested, not in public, but in those small internal moments where your instinct screams, speak, and your wisdom whispers, wait. Strategic silence is not passive, it's active control. You're not withdrawing, you're watching, you're giving people the stage so you can see how they perform when they think no one's guiding the spotlight. And when you finally step forward, you do so with insight they never knew they gave you. Here's a simple practice. For the next week, in every conversation, ask more questions than statements, speak second, not first, and notice how people lean in more, trust you more, and reveal more. This is the paradox of influence. The less you need to assert power, the more you accumulate it. Because when you let others speak first, you're not just being polite, you're studying, you're shaping the terrain without stepping onto it. And that's what Stoic dominance looks like. Calm, silent, unseen, until it chooses to be known. As Marcus Aurelius said, the nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength. In conversation, that calm mind doesn't rush to speak. It listens, it gathers, and then, when the moment is right, it speaks with precision. That's not small talk, that's psychological strategy.
Number 3.
Lead without showing your hand. Most people think leadership means giving orders, taking credit, and standing at the front of the room. But the wisest leaders, the ones with real, lasting influence, lead without ever needing to be seen. They don't force people to follow. They guide people to believe it was their own idea all along. This is not manipulation, it's mastery, and it is rooted in the Stoic understanding that true power flows from influence, not control. The Stoics never glorified dominance for its own sake. They believed that inner mastery naturally shapes outer results. Marcus Aurelius, perhaps the most powerful man of his time, didn't need to declare himself a leader. His restraint, his reason, and his discipline inspired loyalty without demand. As he wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." In modern terms, the best form of power is the one that doesn't compete. It simply transcends. To lead without showing your hand, you must first give up the ego's hunger for credit. That means letting go of the need to be praised, to be seen as the one who made it happen. Instead, your focus shifts toward results, toward outcomes, and toward planting ideas in a way that allows others to feel ownership. Here's the tactic. Instead of giving people instructions, give them direction. Not "do this because I said so," but rather, what would happen if we approached it this way? You're not pushing them, you're pulling their attention toward a new possibility. And because it doesn't come with pressure, they lean in instead of pushing back. Psychologically, this works because people resist being controlled, but they rarely resist their own conclusions. When you plant a seed and give it space to grow, the mind accepts it more easily. You're not changing their mind, you're helping them realize they've changed it themselves. That's how you lead from the shadows. This approach works especially well in teams, relationships, and even public influence. Let's take a real-world example. Nelson Mandela, throughout his life, Mandela rarely imposed. Instead, he invited. He didn't just speak powerfully, he listened. He allowed others to step into the light, even when he had every reason to claim it for himself. That's why his leadership lasted. It wasn't built on performance, it was built on presence. Stoicism teaches us that the more attached you are to status, the more easily you're controlled by it. And this is where quiet leadership becomes not just a tactic, but a form of self-protection. Because when you guide outcomes without taking the spotlight, you move without resistance. No one sees you as a threat, and that allows you to operate freely, invisibly, and effectively. This isn't about hiding, it's about influence without friction. It's about shaping outcomes by shaping perception. You don't need to be loud to be heard, you don't need to be seen to be felt, and you certainly don't need to dominate to direct. So how do you train this? Start by removing your name from things that feed your ego, but don't serve the mission. Let someone else present the idea. If it moves the project forward, that's enough. Ask questions that make people rethink their assumptions, instead of telling them why they're wrong. And when success comes, redirect praise. Not because you're trying to be humble, but because you've already won, quietly. In practice, this creates a powerful ripple. People begin to trust your presence, even when you're not the one talking. They look for your cues, not your commands. And when the time comes that you do speak directly, it carries weight, not because you raised your voice, but because you rarely use it unnecessarily. This is how leaders create movements without noise. They understand timing, they understand ego, and most importantly, they understand people. They know that control creates tension, but influence creates momentum. And momentum, once built, needs no force to continue. It carries itself. As Epictetus taught, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. The quiet leader doesn't announce their values, they live them. They become the still point in a spinning world, and that stability draws people in, not with charisma, but with clarity. So here's your challenge. The next time you're in a position to lead, ask yourself, how can I make this happen without needing to be the one who made it happen? How can I guide without gripping? How can I influence without clinging to recognition? Because the highest form of power is invisible, and the deepest form of respect is earned in silence. The Stoic doesn't lead to be admired. He leads because the path needs clearing, and when the work is done, he fades back, unattached, unaffected, unshaken.
Number 4.
Play the long game. In a world obsessed with speed, those who master patience become dangerous. The average person wants quick validation, instant success, overnight recognition, applause that echoes now but fades tomorrow. But the Stoic doesn't chase applause. He builds slowly, silently, strategically, because he knows that real power is never won in moments. It's earned across seasons. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not expect Plato's ideal republic. Be satisfied with even the smallest step forward and regard the outcome as a small thing." That is the mindset of a long-game thinker. It's not about being passive. It's about being precise. The Stoic doesn't waste energy chasing every opportunity. He plants seeds, tends the soil, and waits with discipline, knowing the harvest always comes to the one who didn't quit halfway. But here's the paradox. Most people don't lose because they failed. They lose because they couldn't wait, because they abandoned the process for something more exciting. They were seduced by shortcuts, and that's exactly where the Stoic gains the edge. Not by doing more, but by doing what lasts. To play the long game is to build leverage instead of chasing noise. It's staying quiet while others perform. It's sacrificing attention today for autonomy tomorrow. Because the truth is, real dominance happens in the shadows. Not when you're being celebrated, but when you're being underestimated, when no one's watching, and you're still showing up, still refining, still building. Take the example of Steve Jobs. Before the world praised him for changing the future, he was dismissed, doubted, even fired from the company he built. But he didn't lash out. He didn't rush to prove himself. He went silent. He spent years rebuilding, privately, intentionally, and when he returned, it was with leverage no one could take from him. That wasn't luck. That was long-game strategy in motion. We see the same mindset in someone like J.K. Rowling. Before Harry Potter became a global phenomenon, she was writing in cafes, broke and overlooked. She wasn't chasing fame. She was building quietly, driven not by applause but by purpose. Her breakthrough didn't happen overnight. It happened because she stayed in the game long after others would have stopped playing. She didn't react to rejection. She used it. She didn't collapse from waiting. She trained in the dark. The Stoics would say, don't waste your energy chasing applause. Use it to build something that doesn't depend on applause to exist. A skill, a system, a vision that compounds with time. Seneca warned against chasing wealth or recognition for their own sake, reminding us that it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Most of that waste comes from impatience, from mistaking activity for progress. So how do you live this principle? You learn to delay gratification without resentment. You focus on systems, not flashes of success. You make peace with being invisible, because being unseen doesn't mean you're failing. It often means you're not being distracted. This shows up in creative work. The artist who posts daily online, chasing likes, burns out fast. But the one who quietly writes every morning, edits in silence, and improves without public validation, he becomes undeniable over time. Why? Because the long game makes you better, even when no one notices, especially when no one notices. It also applies to relationships. Instead of trying to win people over with grand gestures or performative charm, you build trust slowly, through consistency, through truth, through presence. The Stoic doesn't network, he connects. He doesn't seek quick alliances. He earns respect quietly and lets time reveal loyalty. The emotional challenge, of course, is this. Can you stay focused when no one is clapping? Can you keep working when it feels like nothing is happening? Can you choose progress over performance? Clarity over clout? That's what separates those who are remembered from those who are forgotten. Most burn bright and vanish, but the Stoic plays to endure. And because of that, he builds foundations while others chase fireworks. The long game isn't slow, it's sustainable. It's not about waiting for something to happen. It's about making something so strong, so real, so undeniable, that when it finally does appear, it cannot be ignored. So here's your practice. Choose one thing today that you'll commit to for the next 10 years. Not 10 days, not 10 weeks, 10 years. Build without applause, learn without needing to show, grow without demanding recognition, and let your results speak, not loudly, but undeniably. As Epictetus reminds us, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Playing the long game is exactly that. It's choosing who you want to become, then structuring your entire life in quiet service of that decision. Not for attention, but for alignment. Because while others chase fast wins and fade, you'll keep rising slowly, steadily, permanently.
Number 5.
Control your emotions to dominate. If someone can control your emotions, they don't need to control anything else. You've already handed them the reins. That's why the Stoics treated emotional self-mastery as the highest form of strength. Not strength over others, but strength over yourself. Because when your emotions run wild, you become reactive. And a reactive person is easy to read, easy to provoke, and easy to manipulate. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was describing psychological armor, the ability to hold your center while the world pushes in every direction. A calm man doesn't lack emotion. He simply refuses to be ruled by it. And this is where most people lose their power. They believe emotions are signals to act. Right now, they feel anger and strike. They feel fear and retreat. They feel insulted and lash out. But the Stoic sees emotion differently, not as an enemy, but as information, something to observe, understand, and most importantly, choose whether to respond to. This choice is the difference between a man who owns himself and a man who is owned by everything around him. Let's ground this in real life. Picture a tense business meeting. You've just been challenged, your ideas, your work, your reputation, put on trial in front of others. The instinct is to react, to defend yourself, to reassert dominance. But imagine instead, you pause, you look, you breathe, you speak last. And when you do speak, it's calm, direct, and precise. You've now shifted the room, not through force, but through restraint. This is the essence of dominance. Not overpowering people emotionally, but making sure you cannot be overpowered emotionally yourself. Now consider LeBron James. He's been mocked, doubted, and dissected for 2 decades. And yet his responses rarely betray frustration. He doesn't match the noise. He filters it. He plays his game. That's not passivity. That's command, emotional regulation, practiced under pressure until it becomes presence. Or take another example. Michelle Obama, as First Lady, she faced criticism from every direction. But she didn't snap back. She didn't engage in petty battles. She led with grace, anchored, measured, clear. Her calm didn't make her small. It made her undeniable. Because true influence doesn't shout, it endures. The Stoic phrase "observe, don't absorb" captures this perfectly. You don't need to block emotions. You simply learn to witness them without drowning in them. The first wave of emotion is rarely the one you should act on. Behind anger is usually a wound. Behind fear, a lesson. Behind pride, often insecurity. Often. Seneca wrote, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." And that's not about suppression. It's about direction, feeling fully, but acting deliberately, delaying reaction long enough to ask, is this response useful, or is it just automatic? One daily practice. Whenever something triggers you, don't respond for 90 seconds. Let the first reaction burn out. You'll often find there's nothing left to say, or what you now say comes from wisdom, not ego. That's how emotional stillness sharpens your voice. The benefits compound. The person who can't be rattled becomes the one others turn to in chaos. The one who speaks only after observing becomes the one whose words land deeper. And the one who no longer reacts becomes the one who quietly rules the room. Over time, you begin to feel it in your body. Less tension, fewer regrets, more clarity. Your mind becomes your ally, not your enemy. You become harder to read, harder to provoke, and harder to break. And in a world addicted to drama, this calm becomes magnetic. People lean in. They respect your presence even if they don't understand why. Because you've broken the pattern, you've become the exception. This is Stoic power, not in suppressing emotion, but in transforming it into signal, into fuel, into depth. You feel everything, but you fold to nothing. And that is how emotional mastery becomes dominance, quiet, clean, unshakable. Number 6, be invisible, work in silence. The greatest power is not always the one on display. Often, it's the one moving quietly in the background, unseen, underestimated, and therefore unstoppable. In a world that rewards performance and punishes patience, choosing invisibility becomes your most strategic decision. Because when no one sees you coming, no one can prepare to stop you. The Stoics lived by this. They didn't believe in noise for the sake of visibility. They believed in preparation, in private effort, in progress without spectacle. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do. Sanity means tying it to your own actions. The message is clear. If the world sees you too soon, it owns your momentum. But if you build in silence, your results arrive like a thunderclap, unexpected, undeniable, irreversible. Most people today are addicted to visibility. They mistake attention for progress. They post every idea before it's ready. They announce every plan before it's real. And in doing so, they dilute their power. The Stoic avoids this trap. He understands that what's unseen has room to grow, protected from sabotage, from envy, and from premature judgment. When you work in silence, your advantage is twofold. First, you preserve energy. You don't waste time justifying your steps to others. Second, you protect your direction. Without outside interference, your focus sharpens. You move cleaner, faster, freer, and most importantly, no one builds a defense against what they don't know is forming. Let's take a real-world example. Leonardo da Vinci, one of the most creative minds in history, worked on hundreds of inventions, artworks, and concepts, many of which were never shown publicly during his lifetime. He was obsessed with mastery, not exposure. And because of that, his work endured. It wasn't fueled by the spotlight. It was built in the shadows. His notebooks weren't for the crowd, they were for the craft. This mindset is rare, but it's not outdated. In fact, it's more relevant now than ever, because when everything is broadcast, the one who holds back becomes mysterious. And mystery is magnetic. It causes people to wonder, to guess, to speculate. And when people can't label you, they can't limit you. Silence then becomes a strategy. Not of avoidance, but of control. You decide when to speak, when to reveal, when to strike. And until then you train, you build, you refine, quietly. This doesn't mean hiding forever. It means respecting the incubation phase. A Stoic doesn't rush to show what isn't fully formed. He gives it time. He knows that power revealed too early becomes fragile. But power revealed fully matured? That's dominance. To live this way, you must detach from the need to be seen. That's not easy in a culture addicted to applause. But as Epictetus warned, if you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In other words, your silence might confuse people. Let it. Your absence might make them doubt you. Let it, because when you reappear, it will be with something no one saw coming. And that's the key. When your movements are private, they're protected. No one can criticize what they don't know. No one can steal what they haven't seen. And no one can stop what they never expected. This applies to everything. Your next career move, your business idea, your personal healing, even your physical training. Not everything deserves a post. Not every step needs an announcement. When you keep it to yourself, you own it. And when you own it fully, you release it on your own terms, with force. So how do you train this? Start by closing the loop. Resist the urge to share the moment you start something. Let your work become your announcement. Let the results arrive before the attention. And when the world finally takes notice, you won't need to explain. You'll already have proof. The Stoics didn't work to impress. They worked to become. That's what silence gives you. Space to grow, room to fail without judgment, freedom to reinvent without external pressure. Because once you realize that visibility is not the goal, but impact, you begin to understand why the strongest moves are often made in complete stillness. So let the others chase validation. Let them spend energy on appearance. You'll spend yours on mastery. Because when you work in silence, the world doesn't see you coming. And by the time it does, it's already too late. Number 7, strategically play small, never outshine the master. In a world that rewards boldness and visibility, the idea of playing small sounds counterintuitive, but not to the Stoic and not to the strategist. Because when everyone is trying to be seen, the one who dims his light on purpose stays alive in the game long enough to win it. Power is not just about shining, it's about knowing when not to. The Stoics understood this. They believed pride was a kind of blindness, one that made men vulnerable to flattery, envy, and sabotage. Seneca warned, the first step towards greatness is to be honest. That honesty includes knowing when your greatness threatens those above you and learning to conceal it, not out of fear, but out of foresight. To never outshine the master doesn't mean suppressing your potential. It means protecting it. It means understanding the social terrain well enough to avoid triggering insecurity in those who currently hold power. Because when people feel overshadowed, they don't get inspired. They get defensive, and defensiveness quickly turns into resistance, exclusion, or quiet sabotage. Insecure people don't attack when you're weak. They attack when you're rising, when you start to glow too brightly in a room where someone else is used to being the sun. And if you're not careful, your progress becomes a threat instead of an asset. The Stoic doesn't allow that. He plays the deeper game. He lets others believe they're still in control. He lets them take the credit. He praises upward, not because he's fake, but because he understands something most don't. Being underestimated is a position of power. Take the example of Keanu Reeves. Despite his global fame and success, he remains almost aggressively humble. He compliments others. He lets his work speak for itself. He doesn't dominate interviews or demand attention. And because of that, he's respected across industries, cultures, and generations. He's admired not for how loudly he shines, but for how deliberately he chooses when to. This strategy applies everywhere, especially in environments built on ego, in companies, creative teams, or social circles where status is currency. The person who seems too ambitious, too fast becomes a target. The Stoic avoids this trap. He downplays his wins. He listens more than he speaks. He lets others feel important, even when he knows he could take the lead. Because power is not about proving, it's about positioning. This is not about self-erasure. It's about strategic invisibility. When you play small on the surface, you're often building something massive behind the scenes. You're not shrinking, you're storing energy. And when the moment comes, when the foundation is unshakable, you don't need to shine. The results will do it for you. Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Why? Because those who think you're harmless won't guard themselves against you. They won't block your growth. They'll overlook you until you've passed them. So how do you live this principle? Start by letting go of the need to be recognized immediately. Allow others to feel like they're ahead. Compliment your superiors. Share credit even when it was your idea. Watch how people open doors for you when they no longer feel you're trying to kick them down. The more quietly you move, the more control you gain. Because while others are burning energy to prove their worth, you're storing leverage. You're building relationships, observing power dynamics, positioning yourself carefully, patiently. And here's the real win. When you finally make your move, it won't be contested, because by then, your value will be undeniable, your timing will be perfect, and your influence will have already taken root beneath the surface. The Stoic doesn't fear being underestimated, he prefers it, because the less others see coming, the less they prepare to resist. And by the time they realize what's happened, the game has already shifted. So yes, play small, but do it with intention, with vision, with patience, not because you lack power, but because you understand exactly when to use it. Because the ones who last the longest are not always the ones who shine the brightest. They're the ones who knew when to stay dim until it was too late to stop them. Power isn't about noise. It's not about who speaks first, shines the brightest, or demands attention. It's about self-mastery, quiet control, strategic restraint. The Stoic doesn't chase dominance. He becomes it by controlling what others can't. his own mind, emotions, and timing. These 7 rules weren't just lessons, they were blueprints, tools to help you move in silence, influence without force, and win without showing you're even playing. So now ask yourself, where in your life are you too loud, too exposed, too reactive? And what would happen if you pulled back, observed more, and spoke less? If you found value in this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, true power doesn't announce itself. It's revealed only in silence, in stillness, and in the results that no one saw coming. Stay sharp, stay unseen, stay stoic.